CCJ's 1044 is brought to you by Chevron Dello Heavy Duty Diesel Engine Oil. Now there's even more reasons to choose Dello. What does a volatile and hotly contested 2024 presidential election mean for trucking? You're watching CCJ's 1044, a weekly webisode that brings you the latest trucking industry news and updates from the editors of CCJ. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you'll never miss an installment of 1044. Hey everybody, welcome back to the 1044. I'm your host, Jason Cannon, and my co-host on the other side is Matt Cole. Right now, the 2024 presidential election is pretty much as close to a top-up as it can get. According to poll site 538, former President Donald Trump has consistently had the edge on incumbent President Biden dating back to March, but the margin between the two has never been very far apart.
A president's influence on transportation is felt from many directions, including labor policies, emissions regulations, and even heads of departments that oversee trucking and its rule set, like the Department of Transportation.
We've got less than 4 months to select the leader of the free world, and no other industry has its pulse on the political heartbeat more than trucking, because just about every decision made in Washington, from emissions restrictions to interest rate hikes, has influence on how freight moves.
There's three primary departments that we focus on. There's 8 probably that oversee our industry directly and indirectly, but the 3 I pay most attention to: DOT, Department of Labor, and EPA. I think DOT, we've had a pretty good working relationship with Secretary Buttigieg and his team. Secretary is allocated over $400 million to truck parking and discretionary monies in just the last couple years. That's huge. That is huge. We need over $1 billion. But we're making progress in that area, and he's listening to us. He's working with us. I haven't seen a lot of the draconian rules come out of DOT like we saw, for instance, in the Obama administration. So I think it's largely because we've got a good working relationship. We're not going to agree on everything, but I think by comparison, I think we've had a lot of collaboration that I wouldn't have guessed 2-3 years ago with this administration at DOT.
Trucking's favorable relationship with DOT bucks a trend that generally sees Republican leadership as more friendly to business, while a Democratic leadership tends to favor more regulation. Chris says that trend reverts back to its historical expectation with the Department of Labor.
It has been, all union boss driven, very union leaning, really targeting our workforce. When Yellow went down, set aside their finances. That was an effort led by Sean O'Brien at the Teamsters. It was deliberate, and it put 29,000 employees, including over 20,000 Teamsters, out of work. My niece worked for that company, and he didn't come to the table. He didn't like the terms. He didn't like the conditions. He didn't like the fact that the loan had requirements attached to it. He didn't want that to be the bar for any other negotiation he was a part of. And they had ABF's offer in front of him that he had just signed weeks earlier. And he refused to bargain. And that cost a lot of good, hardworking people their jobs. And I want people to understand that. This guy is in it for himself, not for his representation of Teamsters. It is all about Sean. And, when I look at that, it is, clear testament that if we see more of that sponsored by this president, this White House, it could be the detriment of our industry and the economy. So it's something I pay close mind. I have nothing against being a union member. You want to choose it, you have the right to do so. But you should also have the right not to belong to a union. That's existed for 90 years, and that should continue. So, I look at workforce policy as a game changer. And I think that the contrast between the Biden and a new Trump administration is very stark. I think a Trump administration would take things back to a balanced approach between employers and employees. And I think that's an environment that our industry works well in.
The third department with heavy trucking influence is probably the most obvious behind the DOT. That's the EPA. Chris says a lot of the current administration's emissions policies may already be too far along to simply undo if Joe Biden is unseated as president. And we'll talk about how that might all play out after a quick word from 1044 sponsor, Chevron Lubricants.
We serve customers from Birmingham, Alabama to the Gulf Coast, so our people and our trucks are booked solid all day. There is no slack in our schedules. These trucks can't break down. I choose an engine oil that takes care of the number one issue with our engines, emissions, so we don't have to worry about DPF clogging. I choose the engine oil that keeps our trucks hauling. I choose Dello 600 ADF.
EPA, there's a lot of questions there. There are a lot of rules that could be too far along to be changed by Congress or even executive order, and you'll probably see a lot of that play out in the courts. So it's a little bit of everything. I think common sense, however, would prevail if a new Trump administration came in. I think they would look to things like renewables, repealing FET, taking a more balanced approach and not applying it across the board to the entire industry to comply. I think they would revoke a lot of the waivers in California. We would see some improvements in that agenda that I think would be very welcome.
Chris mentioned the FET, the federal excise tax on heavy trucks. That's been a topic of discussion on Capitol Hill for several years, and we've seen legislation introduced to repeal it several times, but it never gets the final push to the finish line. Chris thinks there now exists an opportunity to finally get it off the books.
First and foremost, you've got to have good champions. So it's got to be bipartisan, which we now have in both House and Senate. More importantly, those champions are actually on the right committee that write tax legislation. So House Ways and Means Committee, Senate Finance Committee. So you need bipartisan support, both chambers, both committees. We now have that. That's a very big distinction from previous efforts. So I'm encouraged by that because that's where the legislation will be introduced. That's where it gets written, amended, and passed onto the floor. So you don't want to be dealing with this on the floor. It's too late at that point. And the second piece of this is you've got to have a vehicle to attach it to. We haven't done a piece of tax legislation yet, which we would be able to include FET repeal. There is a chance that after the election, in a lame duck environment, we might have a tax extenders package done that could serve as that vehicle. So we're eyeballing that possibility. I think the greater chance of this happening is probably in 2025 when the Trump tax bill extenders begin to expire. It's at that point, whether Biden is reelected or Trump is elected, Trump will definitely renew that. That's guaranteed. And that will be a vehicle that I could see FET being attached to. Met with the president last month, had a very good discussion on this very issue. And the merits of obviously, using existing technology, existing diesels in incentivizing the purchase of that, repealing FET makes sense. It would have a tremendous impact on improving safety and reducing emissions. So in my view, this is a win-win across the board. And oh, by the way, this equipment is produced by union labor. So, it covers the gamut of Ds, Rs, political concerns. I don't see there being anyone out there that does not have a benefit from passing an FET repeal. So former president was very open to this idea. I believe the Biden administration, if we had a tax vehicle, could also be persuaded to adopt this for the reasons I just cited. And obviously we have Democrat support on the Hill for it. So it goes a long way regardless of who prevails in November. We hope this is on the front burner for passage.
That's it for this week's 1044. You can read more on ccjdigital.com. While you're there, sign up for our newsletter and stay up to date on the latest in trucking industry news and trends. If you have any questions or feedback, please let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you can catch us again next week.